This week's episode of Life Planning 101 originally aired in 2020. Please enjoy. Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services in Eastland, Texas. Tune in every week as we share important information to help you and your family live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, legacy and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
Good Monday morning, and yes, welcome into another great week on Life Planning 101. This one comes from a very personal place, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about it. Of course, everyone knows we always talk about living life on purpose, and sometimes that has everything to do with money, and sometimes it doesn't. Well, today, it's all about downsizing in retirement, and is that the right choice? And what do I mean by that? I'm talking downsizing your house, downsizing your ranch, downsizing your business, downsizing your life, thriving in retirement. How do you do it? And this is going to be an excellent show. So I want to start by telling you a little story about a lady came home and she found her husband. He's got a roll of newspaper all rolled up, and he's just as serious as can be, has two sets of glasses on his face and just ready to switch him out at any moment, and he's swatting flies all over the place. And she says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm swatting flies. So far I've caught 3 males and 2 females. She said, "Well, how the heck do you know their gender?" And he says, "Well, 3 were on the beer and 2 were on the phone." So obviously he's got something to retire to, as we call it, right?
That's
swatting
right.
flies.
Yes.
But no, I say this comes from a very personal place because we get the luxury, I guess, of, watching people in their retirement for 20, 30 plus years. And I love seeing people's stories evolve. I love seeing what people actually do with their retirement. It's really a beautiful thing to watch. And it goes back to, there's an old saying that life actually begins at retirement. And just because you're no longer working, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have goals. In fact, retirement is really the time that can bring fullness to your life, because those goals may be more meaningful than ever before because you have the time, the concentration, and the commitment to be able, or the ability to commit to be able to do the things that you've never been able to do. And when you get to watch somebody do that, that's great. In fact, I had the blessing of spending this last weekend with my aunt on my husband's side of the family, and I told her she is 72 years old, and she's the youngest 72-year-old I've ever known. Okay, and I told her, I said, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. And I was totally serious because the kids were all over there flanking and tying goats and practicing. Well, next thing you know, the kids are back, and she's still over there, and she's flanking and tying goats herself. So,
wow.
Yeah, wow. But isn't that great? Isn't it wonderful that when you see someone just enjoying life so much and just taking it to its fullness and not letting anyone or anything tell you no? Because, she'll be the first to tell you, I have aches and pains, but I don't let that stop me. I still want to be writing and living life to the fullest as long as I can.
Sure.
Pretty powerful. So I want to tell you another story, and this one won't be about flies, I promise. But we met with a rancher and his wife recently, and this is what really spawned the idea for this whole show today, because here they are, they're selling their life's work, not only just their life's work, it's a ranch that's been in the family for a few generations, and it's a big deal. It's an emotional deal. And they're starting to talk about what they're going to do with their retirement because they need to sell the place. And they've got plans to be able to follow good weather, maybe have a couple homes, spend time with the grandkids. They want to travel. And then they also said they had another idea. Of course, they're going to have to find a new home. So a new home to them meant they were going to downsize to about 1,000 acres. After all, what would they do with all that free time if they didn't have something to take care of?
Right.
So that doesn't sound like a big deal, but something I have heard from ranchers for years is whether you have 100 cows or you have 1,000 cows, there are daily obligations. you work 7 days a week. Even if you have Sundays off, you really aren't having Sundays off because you still have those obligations. So downsizing to something like that, is it really retirement? And my experience of what we see people do is that when they do that, they aren't really retiring. They're going into semi-retirement, but they're not going into real retirement. Now, why do they do that? Okay, so here's what I think. And this goes back to another conversation I had recently with a family. A lady was sitting across the table, and she's talking about, well, we do this, we could buy this ranch, we could do this, and she's 60 years old. And I asked her, I said, well, why are you wanting to buy a ranch? What is it that you're wanting to do? And she said, I don't know. I guess I just really don't want neighbors. I guess I just want to really be able to look out my window and not see anybody. Other than that, I really don't want the hassle and the operations and the feeling of being tied down all the time. And it was a real aha for her to be able to self-configure that. But I think that's a lot of people. I think that, especially ranchers, we live out in the middle of nowhere and we're blessed with that. Well, all of a sudden we don't want neighbors, or maybe we have the fear of what retirement looks like. It's unconceivable. I mean, my goodness, when you do something for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, 60 years, change is hard. Big change is even harder.
Sure.
And sometimes it's unconceivable, right? So how do you do that? And it's scary. And so downsizing seems the reasonable way to ease ourselves into retirement. Maybe there's the fear of absolutely doing nothing because we just don't know. We don't have something to retire to. How many shows have we talked about retiring to something, okay? And I hear it time and time again when people get a windfall, when they retire, when they sell a business, whatever it is, all of a sudden these big goals come out of the woodwork, but they're really not life-fulfilling goals. They're work goals. They're something that would help create maybe more wealth or potentially create more wealth. Maybe it's something they want to do or have dreamt about doing all their life for their families or their kids, but they need a 40-year-old body, not a 60-year-old body to do it, and you see this a lot. And so you start talking to them about it, and you really realize that, yes, those were things, but their kids don't really want anything to do with it. Yes, it would create a lot of stress, and oh my goodness, would it impact their finances so that living life on purpose and retiring to something is limited. So what does this mean for you? Well, I encourage you to think about having a successful retirement and forgetting what you've done in the past for just a moment, because all that's really, really, really important. But forgetting about what you've done in the past, forgetting about every goal that you've ever had that you haven't fulfilled. And let's start with a clean slate and figure out what living life on purpose today, the first day of the rest of your life, really looks like. We have more to come right here on Life Planning 101. You don't want to miss it when we come back. Downsizing in retirement. Does it really mean thriving in retirement?
Segment 2, Life Planning 101. We're talking about retirement this morning with Angela. Back to you.
Thank you. And, we're talking about planning for a successful retirement and what that actually means for you and really digging into why you want to do something you want to do. Is it because it's what you've always done and you don't know any different? And, like you mentioned in the break, Terry, you're afraid of retiring and dying. Is it because you have these goals that you've never got to do, but really they're goals that would have worked when you're 40, not when you're 60, and your kids aren't really interested in those goals?
Right.
And that happens a lot. Or, is it something that is really going to help you round out your life and to bring fullness to your life? Because after all, that's what retirement is really about. So I want to talk to you about the house. So there's been this one house that I have seen pop up 3 times since I have been in this business. And it was first sold in 2001, not built, but first sold in 2001 due to a gentleman that had kind of put all his eggs in one basket when he retired and bought a bunch of tech stocks. And guess what? They went down, and he ended up having to sell the place for half of what it was worth because it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and it took a very unique buyer to buy it. And the upkeep on it, it wasn't really the house itself, but the upkeep on it was about $3,000 a month between taxes, the bills, and everything else. And it was just too much. I mean, if you think about it, it'd take about $1 million a year to support that house income-wise. That's big, right?
Right.
So he sold it in 2001. The people that bought it were actually our clients. And they bought it, and we met them post them buying it. So they had told us the story, and they bought it and put it on the market 5 years later for the exact same reason. So not as in the way of their money going down in value and them not having enough money, but the fact of the upkeep of the house. So these people had come off a ranch, and they needed something to, quote-unquote, downsize to. So they didn't want to not have enough to do. Well, they found out that they can't go anywhere. They can't see their kids, their grandkids. They can't travel because there's always something to be done, or they need to hire somebody to actually upkeep it, right? And then they've got this massive cost of just keeping the house up to date. So they put it on the market 5 years later. It takes 11 years total to sell it.
Wow.
Because, again, it's out in the middle of nowhere. So, kid you not, they sell it. Well, here we are sitting 8 years later. It's up for sale again by someone that's lost their job, and they've got it on the market less than what they purchased it for 8 years ago. Should tell us something.
Yeah.
I think all of us can learn something from that, right? Sometimes we get this little kid in a candy shop syndrome. We see something that's like eye candy, but it really doesn't make sense. And I went back, so as I was doing this, because over the years we have done tons of, articles about planning for a successful retirement not being about a dollar amount, will you flunk retirement? And I was looking back through some of these, and I found this interesting piece from 2010, Financial Advisor magazine. And there was an article called Retirees Give Nod to Life Goals Rather Than to the Numbers. And Merrill Lynch had put out this quarterly survey. And the survey concluded that 51% of retirees stated that if they had the chance to do it over, they would have focused more on, quote-unquote, life goals and less on a specific nest egg dollar amount in retirement planning. Okay? Moreover, 38% of that group stated that they would have spent more time on how they wanted to live in retirement. I think it's interesting, and you hear the adage all the time that people spend more time planning their vacation than they do their retirement.
Yeah.
But there's so much truth to that. Oh, it's so much truth. We work so hard with people to pay as little tax as possible, to come up with this great, income plan for them, to make sure that contingency bucket is all the way full. And then if, their legacy is important, we've got that driven out too. So, there's tons of these issues that have to do with just maintaining and preserving and even maybe sometimes growing their success. But the thing that most advisors never talk about and most people never focus on is that right there. How are you going to live in retirement? What are you going to retire to? Change is tough. Change is real tough. But it doesn't mean that you should just downsize, because sometimes downsizing is worse than anything else that could be. We saw this a few years ago. We had a gentleman, again, downsize his business. He actually sold his business, opened another business. Well, then his wife's health began to fail, and he had sunk a lot of money into the second business, this so-called hobby business. And it wasn't really just for the passion. We kept asking, what is your purpose in doing this? And he said, I just have to have something to do. They sunk so much money into it. By the time that she actually recovered with her health, which she did, but by the grace of God, he wasn't done with her yet, their money was not in a good place at all. And they ended up needing to sell houses, property, and things just to support their retirement lifestyle. And guess what they found out through that whole process of her being sick?
What's that?
What they really wanted to retire to. And it had nothing to do with the business. It had everything to do with taking care of their relationships in their life and helping their grandchildren be the best that they could be, helping their kids be the best that they could be, focusing on their church, focusing on their community, and that's where they wanted to be spending all their time and effort. Well, they could have done that double fold had they not taken the first path, right? And so I think a lot of times people go into retirement and they experiment. They experiment by just stepping a toe in the water, just downsizing a little bit, and they don't think that it will hurt their overall picture, but we forget to think about those what ifs. What if you end up with a ranch that you can't sell? What if your health fails and you can't take care of something that you got? And 5 years down the road, you figure out that your initial decision had subsequent consequences that you can't back out of, you can't get back, and it's cost you what you were going to be able to do with your retirement. That's pretty big. So when we come back, right here on Life Planning 101, we're going to give you some planning activities to help you figure out how you don't flunk retirement.
And we're back. Life Planning 101 right here on KPX. Get it why? Angela has an exciting final segment.
We're talking about planning for a successful retirement. And, I kind of reflected on the last two segments. And, we always tell people, it's your life, it's your money. You need to do what you want to do. Our job as, retirement counselors, in a sense, life planners, is to help you kind of self-search and make sure that's really what you want to do, what you really want out of life. You're not just doing it because of a feeling of a need to do something, right? And, we find out that people that are the most successful retirees are those that actually retire. They stay retired successfully because they had a plan to retire, not just to downsize. And it wasn't just a plan for their dollars. They retired to something. And usually, okay, not always, but usually it's something completely different from their past life. And, their dollars are just there to support it. So here's what I challenge you with. Don't just replace time, because first of all, you're actually going to waste it. Life is too purposeful, for you to do that. It just shouldn't happen. Second, you're going to waste dollars. Over and over again, we see people retire and downsize, change their mind, and then again, it has consequences to that. And last, and most importantly, what happens with most ranchers and business owners alike in particular is that they don't die on the ranch, but their health does. And you've got to keep that in mind, that you are retired. So this leg of life, even if you are that young 80-year-old, you still have a lot more risk than you did when you were 40 about certain things. So how can you live life on purpose? What does that really mean to you? And we wrote a great article, this was many years ago. It's called Will You Flunk Retirement? And you could actually go in our Learning Center online and find it. And we've got these little planning activities in here. And it talks about replacing, these different areas of your life and really focusing on what this next leg of life means so that it can bring fullness to your whole picture. And, figuring out your strengths, reflecting on, what you've done in the past and writing down those activities that gave you that sense of accomplishment and excitement and got you going and driving each day, and writing those down and figuring out what are some things that you could do to use them in retirement. And, what about your mind? Think about what's going to drive your mind in retirement. Write down the activities that can give you a sense of engagement or would be challenging for you to work at. It's easy for me to say, as a team roper, I'm around a lot of other team ropers that are retired, and they love to go to ropings that are hard. They love to do it because it's a challenge. It gives their mind a challenge to try to work on fears that they don't know, or dealing with circumstances that are unwarranted. But you've got to keep yourself engaged. If you're doing the same old every day, then yes, Terry, like you said, you have a risk of just retiring and dying. It's very important to engage your mind. Your soul. What are the activities that bring you a sense of meaning or give you a sense that you're contributing something larger to this life than yourself? And that is a huge piece of being able to retire. I feel so blessed in the church that we're in, for the people in our church family that are retired and they focus on giving back. It's just in their nature to have that servant heart and do something that has nothing to do with them. But you know how much joy I also see in those people's faces? And when you talk to them and how happy they are, it's amazing. So what are you doing with your time and your soul and your relationship? I encourage you, if you get a piece of paper, write the word me in the middle of it and draw you a circle around that. And then draw a larger circle around the first circle. And I want you to write the names of the people who you're closest to and that are most important to you. And I want you to draw even a larger circle and write the names of people who are also important to you, but maybe less so. And after you complete this little map, you want to mark the people that you're currently working with or dealing with while you're not retirement. Just put an X over them. And while some of those people you'll still know after retirement, most you won't. And you're going to have to do something to create some new relationships in your life, or otherwise you're going to get lonely. And this is something that people do get scared of, but they don't know how to do. So there's your tool. Start with that and figure out what you can be doing with your strengths, your mind, and your soul, and incorporate new relationships into that, because it's a really, really big piece. And, another thing I had a coach do with me once was have you sit there and write your obituary. Yeah. And as awful as that sounds, it's a great tool, because you still have time, lots of time, to do the things that you want to do so that you fulfill the life that was built for you, right?
I remember doing that whenever I was in school, so I think it's a pretty common habit. But you do have time to change your obituary.
That's right. That's exactly right. So planning for retirement isn't just about the money. It isn't about downsizing. Heaven forbid it isn't about downsizing. Downsizing shouldn't even be in your words unless that is what you're retiring to and you want to do it and you're just excited about it. It's about having and taking the time to bring a fullness to your life and the opportunity to accomplish the goals that you've been setting aside for years, enrich your relationships, sustain you emotionally and spiritually, and, focus on really making a good grade, right?
That's right.
Really looking back and saying, I have no regret. I have absolutely no regret. And if you need help with this, that's what we do. That's why we're here. We want to help people live life on purpose. We want to make sure that your success that you built over the years is just a tool for you to do that. It's not the focus of that. So if you have more questions, make sure you reach out to us at Kennedy Financial Services in Eastland, Texas, the great town of Eastland, Texas. I wish all of our listeners the best every week. We always are praying for the families that we work with to stay happy and healthy through these strange times that we're in. And we just ask that God bless you abundantly in your own lives, and as you seek out these purposes, that know that someone's behind you and someone's praying for you. Have a great week, and we hope to have you on the show next week at Life Planning 101.
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Smart Money Group and Kennedy Financial Services. If you have questions, you can email them to lifeplanning@kennedy-financial.com. Be sure to tune in next week for more Life Planning 101. The opinions expressed herein are those of the firm and are subject to change without notice. The opinions referenced are as of the date of publication and are subject to change due to changes in the market or economic conditions and may not necessarily come to pass. Any opinions, projections, or forward-looking statements expressed herein are solely those of the author, may differ from the views or opinions expressed by other areas of the firm, and are only for general informational purposes as of the date indicated. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Smart Money Group LLC. Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group LLC are separate entities and are not owned or controlled by Calton & Associates Incorporated.